Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Joining me today once again is NETX5, and we're going to continue on the Director Retrospective series I've been doing, and we're going to look at Paul Thomas Anderson's most recent film in his catalogue, Phantom Thread. And for those who haven't seen it, this film is set in the 1950s in London, and it looks at renowned dressmaker Reynolds Woodcock, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, and his sister Cyril, played by Leslie Manville. They're ultimately at the centre of the British fashion, and they dress movie stars, socialites, heiresses, and a variety of other people. It really looks at how a lot of women come in and out of Reynolds' life until he meets a strong-willed woman named Elma, played by Vicky Krieps. And it looks at the relationship that these two form and the back and forth that they have and how they're trying to shape the relationship and get what they want out of it. And it all leads to quite a surprising, I guess, in a way, ending. Look, I really like this film. I firstly want to say it's beautifully shot. It's one of the best shot films that P.T. Anderson has done. It's breathtaking in the shots and the way it's set up. And there was talk of that maybe he was the one who did the cinematography, but I'm not quite sure. But I think it's beautifully looking. The acting is fantastic. You know, Daniel Day-Lewis gives one of his finest performances, very underplayed sort of character he's playing here, and the last character he's sort of played before his retirement. I think Vicky Krieps does a really great job next to Daniel Day-Lewis and is a really good scene partner with him. I think Leslie Manville does a really fantastic job playing Cyril, Daniel Day-Lewis's character's sister. And the relationship that they have is really interesting to watch. I think it's beautifully written and the music is just fantastic. So what did you think of the film?
I love this movie. This movie is in my top 5 favorite films of all time. This is a film where I don't like to use this word often, but it's a perfect movie. Everything technically was very well done, fantastic. The acting was spectacular. The story was engaging, gripping. I loved every single aspect of this movie. And there are very few movies that just hooked me in from the very first minute and held my interest right to the end. And for me at least, I think this is the best film of this decade.
Wow.
In my opinion.
That's interesting. Like I agree. I think it's a brilliant film and very well done. And there are some great scenes in it. I think the most thing that I struggle with is the fact that of how she poisons him to ultimately make him a bit more loving and allow her to care for him. But in saying that, I can understand why they did it. It's a relationship that I don't understand, but that's fine. I don't need to understand. It's just watching it unfold on screen.
Well, it's unconventional because you get the traditional romance story where they get together and then it becomes a bit bitter and then they break up or like the relationship didn't work. Where here it's more like it's doing something different where like she poisons him and then it's like it's through the tender love of, you know, mending him back to health. It's where their connection becomes more stronger that way.
Yeah, I agree, and that sort of works for this film. And watching this film for the second time, I could really see that, and it made a bit more sense to me than when I first saw it. So there's a whole heap of scenes in this film I really, really liked. I really loved the opening sequence when we first are sort of thrown into the world, and we get to meet Reynolds Woodcock, and we get to meet Cyril, and we get to see the sort of world they inhabit. And I thought that opening sequence was fantastic. The music was just perfect. And I just loved the camera work in that sequence.
One of my favorite scenes, and it's a very small scene, is the scene where all the main characters are having breakfast and like it's quiet time, and then like and Vicky Krieps is just, you know, like making too much noise, just scraping the butter on the toast, pouring the tea. And this is a good example of sound design. Like it's supposed to be a quiet scene, but then you get all these noises that are just so loud and like it's like perfectly detailed.
Yeah. Well, the sound design is brilliant. I love how they enhance the sound to really get that essence of how annoying it is for him.
Yeah, but like speaking of the musical score, like the score by Johnny Greenwood is one of the best musical scores I've ever heard on film. The use of the instruments is just mesmerizing to listen to. And some of these scores border on the line of peaceful and like tension filled.
Yeah, I think this music is a great example of how they're able to use it to get emotions out. It's like another character, but it also sort of a great example of how the music's used to tell a story. You know, it sort of explains in a way through music of what's happening by changing the sounds and by what instruments they use and how it's ultimately used in certain sequences and set pieces, which I really think is great. Another scene I really liked. So there's a sequence where they have they go to this party ultimately and have this dinner, and on this long table and this candle lit, and everybody's sitting around talking and eating and stuff on this really long table. And you don't really see that this much in today's society. It's sort of an old traditional thing, and that's why I think it was a great way to set this in the 50s, to have that sort of style, that sort of look, that sort of feel that films from that era had. And I think this scene's really great in that aspect. There is something about this film that really feels like it is from, it was made in the 50s. And this sort of a lot, the way this film's shot, it sort of feels like a sort of a Hitchcock sort of film in many ways. Just the camera angles, the choices made, and also the music. It sort of reminded me a lot of Notorious that he did. It's sort of similar in many ways.
A few of my other favorite scenes are pretty much character scenes, where it's like the characters interacting with each other and the dialogue said and the way that the setting is lit, the way some of them are shot. Pretty much I enjoyed a lot of the scenes in the film. Like, there's not one dull one, and not one of them felt out of place.
No, they all sort of served a purpose. I did like the scene towards the end after he's married Elma, and they have this, he starts to explain how he's feeling and how she's affecting him to his sister, and I just think that whole sequence is fantastic. And I agree though, most of the scenes are just beautifully shot and they all serve a purpose, and nothing is wasted or out of place in it. I think it's just captures that sort of era and that world really well. And this film's another example of P.T. Anderson really looking at, themes of love and relationships. And Reynolds Woodcock is another character that's trying to prove himself. And he's a character that is sort of very driven and is solely focused on making dresses. There's a scene where she says to him, when they first met, Elma says to him, "Why haven't you married?" And he goes, "Because I make dresses." So his whole focus is making dresses, and nothing else is going to get in the way of doing that. And he's a very driven man who has ideas of what he wants to accomplish in life. And I think this is the type of characters that P.T. Anderson has in his film, where they're just trying to, it's about their job, it's about what they can do and what they're capable of, and we get to see that unfold on film.
Yeah, I think this film and There Will Be Blood is Daniel Day-Lewis's best work, and that's because Paul Thomas Anderson is able to bring something out of him that not a lot of other directors can. Yeah,
and I think Anderson's been really good though with a lot of actors, putting actors in particular roles they've never played before, or he seems to understand how people work too, and he creates a friendship and a sort of a family environment when he's making a film. And I think when he works with Daniel Day-Lewis, he sort of captures that and is able to bring out that sort of subtleness that Daniel Day-Lewis has, but also that power he can convey in just a look. I think with each film I reviewed of P.T. Anderson, he's evolved as a filmmaker. To go from Hard Eight to Boogie Nights is a big jump, and that's quite a big film. But to go from those early films to this, it's like he's evolved in such a way. He knows how to use the camera, he knows the story he wants to tell, and he's just evolved as a person, I guess, and a filmmaker. And it just is this is an accumulation of everything he's learnt and done, and he's able to execute a film in such a way with using all these techniques. And I think this is just beautiful in that regard.
For me, Paul Thomas Anderson is one of those rare directors. He's a filmmaker who I just click with. A lot of his films I can connect with both on an emotional and personal level, as I can see elements of his characters in myself. And that's why I like his films a lot. And not only because he technically does great things with his films and tells a great story, great music, everything just perfect in every way, but there's a certain heart to his films that just really gets to me. And for me, in his entire filmography, there's not one bad film. I've enjoyed all his movies, right from Hard Eight all the way to Phantom Thread. All of them are good in their own way. Some are better than others, and others are a bit flawed. But even with those flawed films, I still enjoy them a lot. And as I said, Anderson is a rarity and has qualities that we don't see in a lot of modern directors or even classic directors. He's definitely one of those one-of-a-kind directors. And I think he directed, possibly, for me at least, his best film in Phantom Thread.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that. I agree. I think there's not one of his films that are bad. I think all of his films are really well done, really creative. He's a unique voice. He's refreshing in many ways because he doesn't do the same film twice. And he's really committed to period pieces in a lot of ways. Most of his catalogue is period films, and he really commits to that era. He commits to what was happening at that time, and it's really authentic, and you believe it, and you get swept up in the world. And I think this is another good example of how he's able to create really interesting and colourful characters and put them into simple circumstances and tell simple stories, but be effective with it. His use of camera work, his choice of music, the actors that he puts in it, the characters he writes for those actors, and the performances that these actors give is just extraordinary. And I think that he's just become probably nearly my favourite director of all time, because I just think that he's so unique and original, and he creates a family unit when he's making a film, and it's more about the experience than it is of the film itself. And I really loved that, and he sort of experiments and evolves with each film, like I said previous. And it's just good to see a director out there still refreshing and original and unique and different and doing something special in his movies. And I just think overall I've thoroughly enjoyed revisiting all of his movies and seeing some films I haven't seen of his. And I think he's definitely a director worthy of the praise that he receives for the films he does make. And I'm a big fan of him, and I look forward to the next film he does make, and I'll once again review that as well. And that's about it for the Director Retrospective series focusing on Paul Thomas Anderson. With the Director Retrospective series, the next director I'll be looking at is Catherine Bigelow, and be doing a lot of her sort of movies and sort of reliving ones I've seen and looking at ones I haven't. Anyway, that's all from me today. Special thanks to NETX5 for joining me for this review. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and I hope you're enjoying the Director Retrospective series. But otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.